Good morning, afternoon, evening. How's it going? You doing good? I hope you're doing good. That's I don't know where I'm pointing right now, but that's my stop sign right there. Everyone runs it every single day. Uh, yeah, this is my shirt. I just found this. I quite like it because it makes my arms look bigger than they actually are, which I enjoy. It makes me feel very good about myself. Anyway, why do we like conflict? Why do we love seeing a struggle? There's gonna be pain. Of course, there's gonna be pain involved in any conflict, any struggle. Are we all just secretly masochists? Are we sadists? Do we just love the pain? See, every conflict, right? Every story has a conflict. Every story really begins with conflict. Without it, there's no reason, I suppose, to turn the next page or to watch the next scene. Just kind of be boring. The basis of stories really are, we have a character, and that character wants something, right? But something stands in their way. It's that gap between desire and obstacle, right? And that's what we watch. That's what we follow. That's what we attach ourselves to. That's when we see ourselves in that character, right? That's where all that fun drama lives. That's why we watch Rocky. Going after it on the bag or running stairs in Philly, right? It draws us in. There's a little bit of fear there, but there's also courage, and ease doesn't grip us in the same way. It doesn't take, our attention like a struggle does, or conflict, because it all means struggle and conflict. It means that at the end, somewhere down that long, long hallway, there's going to be transformation. There's going to be a transformation of some kind. And this isn't new reasoning or rationale either. A couple thousand years ago, Aristotle said that drama is imitation of action. But action is only compelling when it has stakes. When you got something to lose, it takes something. Through that process, something could be lost. Conflict really is just the soul of narrative. In The Hero with a Thousand Faces, Joseph Campbell described what we would now call the hero's journey. This is at the center of a journey or a cycle. Is what's called the death and rebirth. Now this doesn't have to be an actual literal death. No one's actually dying here, but it's a moment where the hero is broken or stripped down. Maybe even symbolically killed. It's not actual death, but it could be the death of something. The death of certainty, death of innocence, death of who they were before. They've been changed in some way, and it's the death because they've gotten to a point where they can no longer go back to who they were before. The struggle, Mr. Struggle, it's changed them. And the hero's death really is the crucible of struggle. It's the part that really draws us in here. Because we know that if they can survive this, whatever this is, they won't be the same after. But why do we like it? Why do we like watching a struggle? Why are we drawn to conflict? Not just in the stories that we consume, right? But in our own personal lives, right? We put ourselves through hell sometimes to do things, right? We struggle for something. Why? There has to be something else that keeps us coming back time and time again. I think it's because struggle gives meaning. In life as in stories, right? Ease rarely ever teaches us anything. You can only go so far, coasting. It's nice for a bit, but you don't really get that much out of it. It's the moments of struggle and conflict, sometimes even loss and despair, But all of that sort of forces us to grow. Psychologists being the psychologists that they are, they coined a term for this called post-traumatic growth. It's this phenomenon where people, right, they come out of the other end of something, some sort of hardship, right? Not just being potentially scarred by whatever it is that happened, but they usually come out stronger, more purposeful, more compassionate even. The hero's death really is just a reflection, right? It's a reflection of ourselves that we see in characters that we watch, that we read, that we consume, right? These are the result we are all really the result of being in moments and situations that absolutely almost destroyed us. Sometimes they even did, right? Maybe, maybe they took us to that very point of breaking. They took us all the way to the edge, and when we cheer for those heroes on the page or on a screen, right, we're not just cheering for them, right? We're cheering for that version of ourselves. Writers know this. Of course they do. Not only does it sell, right, but it's very, very human. We all like seeing a little bit of ourselves. But who we're cheering for is that part of us that faced that conflict. We like struggle because it's truthful. At the end of the day, life is not about avoiding hardships. It's pretty much impossible. You're going to face something no matter what. I don't care what type of class, I suppose, you were born into. You're going to face some hardship of some point, and there's no way of getting around it, and by the end of it, whatever it is, you're going to be transformed for better or for worse, but you're going to be different by the end of it, and in essence, that makes meaning, that gives us meaning in some way. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist. He was a psychiatrist, but he was also in the Holocaust. And he said in Man's Search for Meaning, that in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning. That's why the hero's death is not the end, but really rather the beginning. Ease may be comfortable, sure, but it's never compelling. It's conflict that makes us pay attention. Maybe that's why we like struggling. That's why we love seeing the conflict, right? Because deep down we want meaning in what it is that we do. That's struggle, that's conflict. It gives us something in our lives that we can attach ourselves to, that we know that by the end of it, there will be something more. Yeah, that's all I got. That's all I had today. All right. I'll see you next time.